Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I call to order the meeting under Agenda Item 5A, General Debate. My name is Sugishwara Gunaratna. I am the Deputy Permanent Representative of Sri Lanka and one of the Vice Presidents of the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to have a focused and interactive discussion, in a moment we will invite statements by state parties for a maximum of 3 minutes each. I now open the floor to the speakers of this session in the order of inscription. I recognize and invite the distinguished representative from Guatemala.
Sin discriminación alguna. Soy Claribel Castillo.
I'm Claribel Castillo, Chairman of the National Council for Support for Persons with Disabilities, called the CONADI in Guatemala. In a world which is changing with technology, persons with disabilities have the right to new information and communication technologies and systems. According to Article 9 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, in paragraph 2G, it indicates that we must promote access for persons with disabilities to have access to new information and communication technology systems, including the Internet. The ICTs have opened up many possibilities where distance is no longer an obstacle to communication and to the development of activities among people who are located in different places. And we cannot forget that we live in a society which is centralized, where information and communication are constantly evolving, and where persons with disabilities can no longer be left behind. We can say that the digital gap is one of the factors of inequality which is the most significant in our time. Given this, and the CONADI in Guatemala has combined efforts and cooperation with the Ministry of Labor and Social Security and the Organization of American States to achieve training of different groups of persons with disabilities in this area and to offer them the technological tools which would make it possible to develop a greater skill and independence in this area when it comes to education, work, and culture in general, promoting the personal autonomy of persons with disabilities. Aware of the fact that the progress we have made is not enough, it's important to work jointly throughout the entire state in order to continue to provide access to all types of information in a way that is convenient and easy. Let us remember that digital accessibility encompasses all of the conditions of disability, and that's why we call upon the digital developers to continue to work on accessibility, on digital accessibility, for the inclusion of persons with disabilities. We also call upon developed countries to continue with their support to promote and develop programs and projects directed to persons with disabilities in smaller countries. International cooperation is an opportunity to improve the sustainable development of communities, and with it to include even further rights such as programs directed to women, girls, and adolescents with disabilities, to carry out health programs, rehabilitation, training, education, justice, and sports, among other fundamental rights for persons with disabilities and their families, who for a long time have been rendered almost invisible.
I thank the distinguished representative of Guatemala. I now invite the distinguished representative of Honduras.
Buenas tardes, señor vicepresidente.
Good afternoon, Vice Chairman. The recent decades have been difficult in Honduras for the community of persons with disabilities, and now it is time to provide solutions. According to the Pan American Health Organization, there's about 12 to 14% of the population in Honduras that has some sort of disability, and this means more than 1 million people. Honduras is the only country in Central America that still does not have a national census of persons with disabilities. And this year we are taking the first step to taking this action with the establishment of the National Registry of Persons with Disabilities, an authority that comes under the General Disability Directorate in Honduras and that will work to obtain better statistics in order to provide better treatment and better management of disabilities in the country. From the beginning of 2022, when the President of the Republic, Xiomara Castro, took office, and after the appointment of the Minister, José Carlos Cardona, in the Social Development Office, we have renewed the commitment in our state towards the community of persons with disabilities. And as a result of this, we continue to provide monetary support to more than 54 NGOs that are working on processes of rehabilitation, training, and inclusive education in the country. In addition to this, Minister José Carlos Cardona created the Solidarity Fund for the disability sector, which is a depository of economic resources to finance innovative sustainable development projects in communities and cities throughout the country, thus benefiting more than 40,000 persons with disabilities and their families only in the first year. Chairman, among the main demands of the community of persons with disabilities, we find a desire to improve the situation of employability and mobility, for which the state has created the virtual job exchange, which serves as a job searching tool for persons with disabilities and is also a hiring tool for the private sector and the public sector, who are forced by law to provide 4% of their employment positions to persons with disabilities. At the same time, this year we are carrying out a pilot project called Accessible Central District, which contains a set of initiatives which go from providing signage in accessible public spaces for persons with disabilities, as well as the use of new information and communication technologies in order to guarantee accessibility in this initial stage in buildings as well as government offices. All of this thanks to the support of the Inter-American Development Bank. The idea with this project would be to be able to decentralize 60 municipal disability units, which will be open this year, of which we already have 38 that have been set up. Our greatest achievement in the past year has been to set up a technical roundtable for the comprehensive reform of the equity law, which is made up of the Secretary of Women's Affairs, led by the Secretary of Human Development, the National Commission of Human Rights in Honduras, and the main disability groups in Honduras. And these include the National Federation of Parents of Persons with Disabilities, the National Federation of...
I thank the distinguished representative of Honduras. I now call on the distinguished representative of Germany. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Germany aligns with the EU's statement. In our current government program, we have committed ourselves to ensuring accessibility in Germany in all areas of public and private life. This is very ambitious, and it's going further than any previous government program. Our goal is to create an accessible, people-centric social environment. And another major goal is to make the labor market even more inclusive. And let me say something about both these issues. Having said that it was coming at the last conference of state parties, I'm very happy to say that we launched Accessible Germany, a federal accessibility initiative in November. We want to make progress with accessibility in areas of life that people with disabilities consider most important. The topics we're focusing on are mobility, housing, health, and digital technologies. We want to make progress with accessible healthcare, for example, creating a plan of action for a diverse, inclusive, and accessible healthcare system. We also intend to build more affordable, accessible housing and provide accessible transport for both long-distance and local journeys. And we're planning to introduce a statutory obligation for private providers of goods and services to ensure accessibility or at least make reasonable accommodations. We already have guaranteed access for people with disabilities and their assistant dogs to facilities open to the general public. And we have taken a big step with the Act to promote an inclusive labor market. Starting in 2024, companies will have to pay a rather high compensatory levy if they do not employ any persons with disabilities. We will also take measures to reduce the number of people entering workshops for people with disabilities and to increase the number of those moving from those workshops to the general labor market.
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany for your statement. I now invite the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to appreciate all the efforts by the Bureau and the Secretariat for convening this session to address the rights of persons with disabilities. The Islamic Republic of Iran has taken a multi-stakeholder approach following the ratification of the Convention in 2009 to address and accordingly work toward the realization of rights of persons with disabilities, including women and children with disabilities. It includes policymaking to budget allocation and implementing laws targeting their specific challenges and concerns, varying from addressing their specific health and economic issues to identifying and removing accessibility barriers in buildings and transportation. In this regard, the State Welfare Organization, as the national mechanism in charge of this issue, is diligently working. Accordingly, the Comprehensive National Laws on the Protection of Rights of Persons with Disability was approved in 2018, covering various issues affecting them, including accommodation, accessibility and mobility, health, treatment and rehabilitation services, sports, artistic and educational affairs, entrepreneurship and occupation, housing, public awareness raising. I would like to take this opportunity to highlight some of the other activities and initiatives of Iran in this regard. To economically empower persons with disabilities and support their families, among others, microfinance services are provided in community-based rehabilitation programs, particularly in rural areas. In an effort to provide persons with disabilities with equal employment opportunities, we have facilitated the recruitment and adaptation of working conditions in governmental organizations to accommodate their needs. According to a law approved in 2016, working hours of women with disabilities have reduced to 36 hours per week with a salary of 44 hours. In order to provide them with the opportunity and preparation to obtain a sustainable job, rehabilitation centers offer vocational training services to individuals over the age of 14.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for your statement. I now invite the distinguished representative from Senegal. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, let me first of all congratulate you on behalf of my delegation on your election to lead our conference, and we express our best wishes for members of the Bureau. The theme of this session is adapting national instruments to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but also this is a forum for us to better understand how to overcome the crises currently affecting humanity, how to promote the inclusion of persons with disability in socioeconomic development. We must also rely on strengthened international cooperation in overcoming the digital divide and including persons with disabilities in the digital revolution. For my delegation, disabilities, according to WHO, are a cross-cutting phenomenon resulting from dynamic interaction between health issues as well as contextual, personal and environmental issues. It is not fatal. We believe in this and we base our government policy on this. Having ratified the convention in 2010, Senegal immediately adopted its own law on the protection and promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities. Under the leadership of the head of state, His Excellency Mr. Macky Sall, with the support of our development partners, Senegal adopted a multi-sectoral approach as part of its Senegal Emergence Plan and the National Strategy for Social Protection. The first plan was put into effect in 2017-2021. The second is underway for the period 2023 to 2027.
I thank the distinguished representative of Senegal. Your time is up, madam. I now invite People with Disability Australia. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Lenape people, whose lands were never ceded. I pay my respects to all First Nations people across the globe. Today, there remain significant issues with legislative, policy and practice frameworks across the world that result in the indefinite detention of people with a disability. Article 14 of the CRPD asserts the right of people with a disability to liberty and security, a fundamental principle that we hold dear. Yet member states continue to detain individuals with disabilities based on their actual or perceived impairments, perpetuating discriminatory and arbitrary deprivation of liberty. This grave injustice demands our unwavering commitment to advocate for the absolute prohibition of detention based on disability. In Australia, specific groups including individuals with intellectual or psychosocial disability and First Nations peoples face disproportionate detention, the root causes of which lie within systems of guardianship, substitute decision-making and mental health laws. These systems perpetuate human rights abuses, they neglect our physical and mental well-being and deny us the necessary support for informed decision-making. These are violations that starkly contradict the fundamental principles that are enshrined within the CRPD. As we deliberate upon the harmonisation of national policies and strategies within the CRPD, we must confront the uncomfortable truth that globally, current systems continue to deny individuals with disabilities their rightful equality before the law. We must address the intersectional inequalities faced by Indigenous individuals with disabilities, necessitating a dedicated and tailored response. I join First Peoples Disability Network in calling on the UN CRPD Committee to establish a formal mechanism alongside the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. This mechanism will serve as a platform to amplify the voices of Indigenous individuals with disabilities from every corner of the globe. Such a mechanism must be endowed with regularity and robust resources, ensuring its ongoing role as an integral part of the UN CRPD's work. We must end indefinite detention of people with disability. We must provide necessary support to address the disadvantages. We must recognise equality before the law, and we must ensure full human rights protections. Now is the time for action. Let us demonstrate dedication to promoting and protecting disability rights so we can foster a world of universal liberty and security. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of People with Disability Australia. Thank you, madam, for your statement. We now go back to the second round of state parties, and I call on the distinguished representative of Belarus.
My name is Vladislav Grib. I am a member of the Belarus National Paralympic team. In athletics, have participated in some of the major international competitions, including the Tokyo Paralympic Games. I'm speaking on behalf of all Paralympic athletes of the Republic of Belarus to convey to you our pain and our lack of understanding of the decision of the International Paralympic Committee to suspend Belarus membership in the committee and ban us from international competitions. This is a great moral trauma for us. We have trained for years, expended maximum physical and moral strength to try and accomplish great athletic victories for the happiness of fans all over the world. For each of us, sport, it means overcoming a difficult fate. It let us demonstrate the strength of our spirit in a life that is far from easy. However, the discriminatory, politicized approach of the International Paralympic Committee takes away our right to do what we love to do most of all. Sport must remain outside of politics. We believe that the Paralympic movement is a symbol of equality, accessibility, objectivity, and impartiality. Politics may not be part of athletic competitions. Athletes cannot be banned from competitions only because of their nationality. This approach is not in line with the values of Paralympic sports. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities made us believe that we are truly equal and that all states would live up to its provisions. We've heard some encouraging statements in that regard, and we want to further advance the peace-building mission of sport, bring the world together in peaceful athletic competitions. This should be supported by all strata of society. Sport as a force for good is widely recognized around the world, and today we need it more than ever before, especially at a time when divisions and conflict seem to overcome dialogue and cooperation. I appeal to you, participants of this conference, to use your international influence and make your countries try to influence the International Paralympic Committee to prevent the discrimination against Belarusian athletes with disabilities just because of their nationalities. We, the Paralympic athletes of Belarus, want to reaffirm our status in open and fair competition. The discrimination against us should stop. It is contrary to the international instruments in that regard. We believe that justice will prevail. Thank you very much. It was an honor to speak here on behalf of Belarusian athletes with disabilities.
I thank the distinguished representative of Belarus, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Colombia. You have the floor.
Saludos fraternos.
Greetings as an activist and now as an official of the Colombian state. It's an honor to share with you the proposals for change and transformation, which is led by the President and Vice President of the Republic, in order to close the structural gaps of inequality, inequity, exclusion, and discrimination that affect the population of people with disabilities in Colombia. The social problems that derive from wide and invisible gaps of inequality and inequity are a growing reality that have a disproportionate impact on persons with disabilities because of their intersectionalities, very often underrepresented. And these intersectionalities are age, gender, sexual orientation, religion, region, and ethnicity, especially in a country such as ours. If we take the perspective of the President of the Assembly, Chava Kurusi, it's crucial to prioritize social protection for persons with disabilities in accordance with Article 28 of the Convention. This is prioritizing human security as well as social justice because it's not enough to have legal standards or norms for a society to be just. Colombia is committed to closing or eliminating breaches in social inequalities. And that is why we have created the Ministry of Equality and Equity in order to provide a dignity to our existence and to provide equal opportunities to groups that have been historically discriminated against and underrepresented. At the Vice Presidency of the Republic, we coordinate and promote intersectoral actions to consolidate a system of universal social protection, to prioritize persons with disabilities as a subject of special constitutional protection. The effort, and this is an invitation for the states parties to the convention, the effort lies in including persons with disabilities, including them in all social areas, and to provide them with social protection such as solidarity pensions and monetary transfers, etc. But we should not confuse welfareism with social assistance. Social assistance does not create dependency. It creates individual agency. It's a priority to improve the focus of social programs, to make persons with disabilities more visible in the social programs, and with inclusive budgets and data. We urge the states parties as well as the international community to include social protection systems. We are beginning the final laps towards Agenda 2030. Let's leave no one behind a reality so that dignity becomes a custom. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Colombia. Thank you, sir, for your statement. I now call on the distinguished representative of Thailand. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of the Royal Thai government, I have the honor to reiterate Thailand's commitment to the full realization and effective implementation of the CRPD. Allow me to underscore the 3 points. First, Thailand places high importance on harmonizing national policy and strategies with the CRPD, expanding opportunity and promoting equality, while addressing remaining disparities to create a just society for all. We have also strived to ensure the rights of persons with disability in all aspects, including accessibility, independent living, and sustainable social inclusion. Second, over the past few years, Thailand has introduced additional policy and measures in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and upgrade its infrastructure to promote an inclusive implementation of Persons with Disability Empowerment Act and the National Plan for the Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities. Third, we also expanded a Disable ID card registration system and disability one-stop service centers at local hospitals and develop mobile medical services and digital service systems to allow persons with disability to have access to urgent health care and public services. Furthermore, a project called Foster Family for Persons with Disabilities has been implemented to provide financial support, assisting persons with disability to live in their community. In addition, Thailand promotes vocational job opportunities for persons with disabilities, as well as support social enterprise for persons with disabilities. Since last year, the Royal Thai government has organized 208 vocational training projects and allocated vocational grants for persons with disabilities and their caretakers in a total amount of over $23 million. Mr. Chair, Thailand remains fully committed to further promoting and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities by harmonizing national legal and policy frameworks with the CRPD, promoting its compliance through various international cooperation, reaping the benefit of digital accessibility, and reaching those who might be left furthest behind. It is our hope that the rights of persons with disability will continue to be an important part of the UN's continuing efforts to leave no one behind as we seek to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and SDGs and prepare for a sustainable future. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Thailand for her statement. We now have a video statement by the distinguished representative of the Dominican Republic.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. Chairman, the Dominican Republic has carried out important strides when it comes to harmonizing public policies and national strategies within the framework of what is established in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities of the United Nations. An example are the standards when it comes to physical accessibility for health centers, for which the Dominican state worked out Decree 779 that ensures compliance with the criteria and requirements for universal design. Similarly, we have the architectural guide, which establishes the sanitary guidelines which must be complied with for the design of these buildings. In order to ensure sexual and reproductive rights of all persons, we have the guide for sexual health and reproductive health with a view to providing advice and to help all persons to exercise their rights in this area. Mr. Chairman, with respect to accessibility, we have Order 826 B2, which ensures compliance with the requirements of accessibility for content on the web. Chairman, likewise, within the framework of social protection, we have the National Fund for Children and Adolescents with Disabilities, designed to raise the quality of life of people who benefit from this with access to comprehensive services as well as education through the national certification and service as well as the registration of disabilities. The Dominican Republic has stepped up its pension system at different stages of life, such as for the elderly. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to conclude by mentioning the challenges that we are facing as a country. One of them consists of strengthening accessibility policies as an element of our rights, and likewise strengthening participatory mechanisms as well as the promotion of employment and strengthening monitoring for compliance with the quota system which has been established. There is still a long road ahead of us, and it's participatory situations such as this that make it possible to reflect our action as a country in favor of a society which is more just, equitable, and accessible. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Dominican Republic. I now invite the distinguished representative of Malawi. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the Malawi government believes that an inclusive data collection system contributes to the development of informed policies and strategies that are inclusive. Malawi has therefore reviewed the mechanism of national data collection in line with Article 31 of the Convention, so that population and housing census, integrated household surveys, demographic and health surveys, and other key national surveys are disability inclusive. This will facilitate the formulation and implementation of policies and strategies that will help to achieve the aspirations of the Convention. Mr. Chair, Malawi's newly developed Vision 2063 and its medium-term development plan aim to have an inclusively wealth and self-reliant nation. This is a commitment that the Malawi government has made towards promotion of inclusion of disability in the national development agenda. Through this development agenda, Malawi intends to increase a conducive environment that gives equal opportunities to persons with disabilities to participate in all aspects of life and contribute to national development. In compliance with the Convention, the government of Malawi reviewed its old disability policy and has come up with a new policy. This policy promotes planning disability interventions by different stakeholders. We have made as a country a number of achievements which include development and adoption of standards on the accessibility and usability of the built environment and the national medical rehabilitation policy, development of a list of assertive devices and specifications and adoption of a national list of assertive technology. Mr. Chair, despite these achievements, Malawi continues to face resource challenges to support implementation of disability policies and programs. While the government of Malawi continues to allocate resources through national budget on disability, there are still gaps in funding from development partners. However, Mr. Chair, Malawi remains committed to promoting disability inclusion in all national policies, plans, and strategies. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Malawi. Next, I invite the distinguished representative of the Center for the Human Rights of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry. You have the floor.
I want to honor our dear friend Jolene Santagut, a worldwide leader in the movement of people with psychosocial disabilities who ended her life this year. Jolene inspired us not only through her human rights advocacy, but by seeking justice for the abuses committed against her personally in the psychiatric system. In her memory, we redouble our efforts for justice towards each individual who has been traumatized by electroshock, neuroleptic drugs, restraints, and solitary confinement, by the psychological torture of institutionalization itself, which seems to close the door on hope. The harms of institutionalization do not end when a person is released. Even in freedom, the impact of past trauma continues. Our relationships with family and friends can be destroyed. We are often impoverished and have lost a home and personal possessions. Our schooling or employment is interrupted. This makes it difficult to apply for jobs without disclosing the reason for gaps in our personal timeline. Psychiatric drugs can cause lasting changes in the brain that make it difficult to withdraw from those drugs and cause irreversible damage to the liver, kidney, and endocrine systems as well as the brain. These are some of the harms for which reparations are required, as called for by the guidelines on deinstitutionalization. A clear priority is to stop harm and address immediate needs. That means stopping all psychiatric detentions and forced interventions, releasing all people currently subject to such detentions and forced interventions, and providing them with emergency assistance if they choose to leave. These measures can be conceptualized as forms of reparation, cessation of violations, restitution, and guarantees of non-repetition. There has been little progress in states' parties towards the abolition of forced psychiatric interventions. Mexico has enacted groundbreaking legislation that established the right to refuse mental health treatment or hospitalization, including respect for the person's legal capacity and decision-making. All countries should follow suit and should enforce and interpret such legislation in line with the guidelines on deinstitutionalization as the first step to providing comprehensive reparation to all survivors. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Center for the Human Rights of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry and for touching on a subject which perhaps deserves a lot more attention. We now come to the third round of speakers from member states. I now invite the distinguished representative of Chile. You have the floor.
Good morning. I already spoke in the morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chile, for reminding us that. Now I invite the distinguished representative of Uruguay then to take the floor.
La temática de esta sesión.
Chairman, we note the theme of this session entitled Harmonizing National Strategies and Policies with the International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Achievements and Challenges. Uruguay has taken important steps to implement the commitments of the Convention in its national strategies and policies. In this respect, we are grateful for the opportunity to be able to share with you these achievements. Due to time, I will only refer to two pilot projects in particular. On the one hand, we are designing a support system so that women with disabilities can exercise their right to maternity and to child rearing, with a focus on women of a lower socioeconomic level. They're the ones who generally lose custody of their children because health or justice teams decide that they are not able to be mothers. In this task, we also have the expert support of the Special Envoy of the Secretary General of the United Nations for Disability and Accessibility, as well as the UNFPA. This latter body provided funds to carry out a diagnosis of the needs and also provided advice with recommendations for this public policy. Furthermore, in order to align our educational policy with the standards established in Article 24 of the Convention, we are working on the design of a program which would make it possible for us to provide a system of support for inclusive education in a specific number of primary schools throughout the country, with a view to expanding this gradually over time. As for the challenges, we aim to improve the impact of the disability perspective in public policies. And for that, our objective is to strengthen organized civil society, granting them an effective place in co-designing and monitoring these policies. With the establishment and involvement of the National Secretariat for Persons with Disabilities as the guiding body for these policies, we have strengthened our institutions and promoted the mainstreaming of disability throughout all of our public policies with a right-centered approach. Lastly, to conclude, I would like to tell you that our country is making progress towards the establishment of a monitoring mechanism for the Convention, which complies with the Paris Principles. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Uruguay for his statement, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Liberia to take the floor. Liberia, you have the floor. If you're not there, I move on to the next speaker. Let me now invite the distinguished representative of the United Arab Emirates. You have the floor.
سيدي الرئيس، نثمن جهودكم.
Mr. Chairman, let us congratulate you on your leadership. Also, we congratulate members of your team. Talking about the rights of persons with disabilities, my country has undertaken a series of governmental measures required in National Law number 29 to ensure access to all fundamental services for people with disabilities. We had a special expo in the country devoted to persons with disabilities, giving them a chance to display their artistic talent and creativity and put accessible technology at their disposal. We'd like to assure those present here of a profound understanding on behalf of my government of the need to make all buildings and all structures accessible to persons with disabilities, working with a variety of stakeholders. We have progressively installed the necessary adjustments and adopted a series of amendments to relevant laws, specifically focusing on the rights of persons with disabilities. One particular focus was access to sexual and reproductive health services for all citizens, including persons with disabilities. We've taken measures also to facilitate access for persons with disabilities to artificial intelligence and high technology devices using it. We also promoted a series of integrated services to promote participation of persons with disabilities in community activities and leadership. Abu Dhabi specifically has launched a program which will be implemented in the coming months to bridge the digital gap and improve digital access for persons with disabilities. We also provide access to digital entertainment for people with disabilities.
The Emirates. I'm told that the distinguished representative of Liberia has now assumed her seat. If you're ready, I would like to invite you to take the floor. Liberia, you have the floor.
Chair, Excellencies, colleagues, I bring you greeting from His Excellency Ambassador George Manawia, President of the Republic of Liberia and the Community of Persons with Disability. This section theme is critical, having realized as a country that sexual reproductive health and rights cannot be achieved without all Liberians, regardless of being with or without disability, given the opportunity to have control and decide over their bodies and sexuality as a legitimate human right. The need to harmonize national policy and strategy became an overall priority of our government immediately upon the passage of the National Commission on Disability Act in 2005, which was a year before the adoption of the UN Convention, a way of ensuring that persons with disability in Liberia build resilience in the face of physical and emotional barriers to participate in all spheres of life. The Commission has a responsibility of reviewing, influencing, and formulating policy as well as monitoring service delivery. Chairperson, the Commission is structured across the districts, county, and region of Liberia in ensuring that no one is left behind. We have reviewed the National Action Plan with support from UNDP, UNICEF, UNESCO Abuja office, which along with a national disability strategy that has been signed by His Excellency Ambassador George Manawia as a way of full inclusion of persons with disability. And I want to inform you, Chairperson, that the three heads of the Commission on Disability are members of the President's Cabinet. We also work with the Liberia Labor Congress and Ministry of Labor in ensuring a decent work manual for persons with disability with support from ILO. Chairperson, as a way of eliminating discrimination against persons with disability in relation to marriage, parental relationship, family pertaining to fertility, livelihood, we have also worked on and validated the sexual reproductive health manual for training of persons with disability under the CARDIA project. We also participated in the first ever national conference of sexual reproductive health and rights in Liberia and came up with a position statement, a joint effort with Amplifying Right Network, Students Association of Sexuality Education, and other actors as a way of promoting and popularizing sexual reproductive health and rights without stigma and discrimination. Furthermore, every first Tuesday of the month, women with disability gather at a commission to discuss issues around sexual reproductive health and rights and issues affecting us as women. Liberia have made significant progress, yet we still see support and partnership in order to conduct a national survey to gather aggregate data for the economic and social inclusion of persons with disability, to also create a national registry of persons with disability at the level of the Commission, and lastly, to develop a national sign language. Thank you so much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Liberia. Now I invite the distinguished representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, allow me to congratulate you on your election as President of this important meeting. Also, I am confident that this meeting will bring fruitful results under your able leadership. Mr. President, I take this opportunity to point out the policy and the social initiative that the government of DPRK is consistently taking to promote and protect the right and welfare of the person with disability in connection with some recent achievements we made. In my country, the personality, rights, and interests of the person with disability are absolutely respected and constantly improved. Under the unified coordination of relevant organs, the step-by-step plan for bringing about a new tone in the protection of persons with disability are made more specific, especially based on the principle of best thing to children. The government is implementing policy to give priority to provide the best of everything necessary for health, education, and the life of children and students with disability. In order to achieve the SDG, the government of DPRK has taken practical measures while constantly updating policy and regulation to further improve education for children with a disability. The Korean Rehabilitation Center for Children with a Disability is intensifying the scientific and technical studies for rehabilitation and providing early special education to children with disability on the basis of the modern scientific and technological information dissemination center. The vocational school for the person with a disability is actively applying new methods of education, including tele-education and home visit education, in the consideration of the physical condition of each student with disability. Korean Association of Deaf and Blind is also contributing to education of the students with hearing impairment by developing various sign language tutorial application in the collaboration with a specialized organ. Even after completing the secondary education, the students with a disability are allowed to enroll in universities and the vocational college and school to receive higher education as their wishes. Mr. President, at this consistent position of the government of DPRK to develop the international cooperation and exchange for genuine promotion and protection of the human rights, including protection of persons with disability. Government of DPRK remain committed to fully implement its mission and obligation as a state party of the CRPD. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, for his statement, and I now invite the European Network for Independent Living to deliver the statement. You have the floor.
I represent the Youth Network of the European Network on Independent Living. Though huge progress has been made throughout the years, we persons with disabilities, especially the youth, still face grave human rights violations. Young persons with disabilities, in our opinions, are not prioritized by the governments and public officials in negotiations too often. While we should not have to justify our participation and sit at the table, as we are human beings, and by just this virtue are already allowed to participate. The courts are often not sensitive to disability and ask disabled parties to come to a settlement, just as the many countries were offering victims of rape, women, to negotiate with their perpetrators rather than giving them under the criminal responsibility, which was condemned by the CEDAW Committee of UN. More than 60% of the European disabled persons still do not have choice to live independently. Due to the lack of accessible environment or support services, they are forced to live in institutions or be isolated in their homes. In my country, Georgia, many people with disabilities have to live in monasteries, not because of their religious choice, but because there's no housing and other support services. It's strange how even in the most democratic countries, persons with disabilities still face difficulties in getting employment and education. We urge the governments to implement the UNCRPD, the General Comment number 5, and concluding observations by the CRPD, and create clear deinstitutionalization strategies with indicators and funding allocated to it. We call on the governments to release disabled persons from institutions. Would they host 300 or 3 people in them? I thank you.
I thank the European Network for Independent Living for their statement, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Denmark to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my pleasure to address the 16th Conference of State Parties to the CRPD. The CRPD plays a crucial role when developing new policy. Denmark ratified the convention in 2009, so all new policy must comply with it. Denmark is also continually working to promote the full realization of the rights of persons with disabilities, to continually strengthen the support and care that persons with disabilities need to improve their quality of life, and to achieve the same possibilities of managing on their own. And in line with this year's overarching theme, there are both achievements and challenges in this work. One challenge is the comparatively large amount of young people with disabilities who are neither active in the workforce nor have they completed an education. Persons with disabilities are an often overlooked resource for society, and the Danish government wants to change that. It's a goal for the Danish government to formulate an action plan with the ambition to create more opportunities and better opportunities for persons with disabilities. The plan will focus on measures to increase the involvement of persons with disabilities in the workforce, as well as ways to provide greater flexibility in education for students with disabilities. Another challenge we're tackling is the legal certainty of persons with disabilities. There is unfortunately a large amount of appeals and complaints concerning the support that is guaranteed by law for persons with disabilities. To counteract this, Denmark has adopted several ongoing initiatives that aim to strengthen the legal certainty, the casework quality, and the trust between citizens and authorities. The Conference of State Parties is a unique opportunity to share experiences and provide new approaches to the challenges we face. We look forward to a fruitful conference and reaffirm Denmark's commitment to the overall purpose of the CRPD, to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Denmark for her statement, and I now invite the last speaker of the general debate for today, distinguished representative of Ecuador. You have the floor.
Buen día con todos. Mi nombre es Pedro.
Good morning. My name is Pedro Lace, and I'm representing my country, Ecuador, and I would like to extend my greetings to all members of the delegations here at this convention. My delegation recognizes the importance of celebrating this convention, where we will discuss three very important items, which are mechanisms to guarantee equal access to sexual and reproductive health services, digital accessibility for persons with disabilities, and how do we reach people who are underrepresented, persons with disabilities who are underrepresented. In applying the international standards of the CRPD, Ecuador has established public policy around two axes, which ensure compliance of the rights of persons with disabilities. Along this axis, Ecuador has affirmed the commitment to the recommendations given by the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. At the national level, Ecuador has implemented important changes in complying with the Convention. For example, applying a technical standard for providing autonomy to persons with disabilities, educational support for students with learning difficulties linked or not to their disability, regulations to ensure compliance with accessibility, the application of laws on inclusive education, as well as scholarships for persons with disabilities. For Ecuador, the participation of persons with disabilities and their families in formulating public policies which are inclusive strengthen our management, both in health, education, as well as access to justice, employment, as well as other areas. And all this designed to satisfy the demands of persons with disabilities in Ecuador. And lastly, it's in the interest of our government to seek to strengthen integration processes as well as the exchange of information at the bilateral level. We work to guarantee accessibility to persons with disabilities in Ecuador. In Ecuador, we are working in favor of their rights. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ecuador for his statement. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I now announce the suspension of the general debate session, which shall be continued as scheduled tomorrow morning, starting from 10 a.m. And the general debate shall start with the remaining list of speakers. We start with Andorra, followed by the Philippines. All delegations are invited to consult the updated list of speakers for the general debate that will be posted in this meeting room 4 right before the start of the morning meeting on June 15 tomorrow at 10 a.m. I now call for a 2-minute housekeeping break and invite the panelists of the Roundtable 2 to take their seats at the podium. This meeting is closed.
When they open it? Because a lot of people press at the same time. So okay. There will be a list showing on there. Okay. And then yeah. But then when can he click it? Just as soon as they ask us? Like when he wants to see it. Okay. And we can just click anytime. Yeah, like when they're ready to speak, they can just press the button. Just press the button. As soon as they invite? Or? As soon as they invite, okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry. It's my second week. So I was like, I just appreciate the clarity. I'm Gaia. Nice to meet you.
After the panel deliver their statement, deliver their presentation, then I want to make intervention. Okay, the others all right? Do you? So I told them Nigeria would be added only after the exhaustion list and they added. But you have your
Yes, so sorry. And then that is the button to click.
Yeah, I'll tell him, yeah. I told him around 4. So just go. It's the 25th floor. You know where will we? Not that small area. The big area, like the big, and you see the kitchen, you remember that kitchen?
Yeah, yeah.
That area, like there. You will see, just let me know when you're there, I'll tell you.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you will see him, Simon. He will be at the end. He's sitting there. There are not that many people there. Do you know? Can you go with her? Maybe you can go with her if you can.
I can hear her.
Yeah.
她坐在你今天坐的那个座位的对面。Yeah, I think so. Like where I sit.
Tell her it's at the end of that.
Yes. 就是你第一天坐那个座位的对面。
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Call me if you don't find him. I'll tell him to. I'm sure he will see you.
I think colleagues to put on and then we will explain it. I'm taking it to her. Okay, sure. That's okay. So as soon as the Q&A starts, can you take it to her? Yeah, sure.
You're together.
Alexia. Ariel, she has to leave early.
Oh, Vivian has to leave early? I'm so sorry. Yes, yes, yes. I will do it. No. We will figure it out. No.
She can help with
Okay, cool. No, but then, you know,
No, only Ariel wants to go.
Ariel, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. No. Ariel, please, all the documents. Are you sure
No, she will handle. No.
I didn't know. It was. I mean, it's not my fault. It's my fault. It's the translators and interpreters who have this version, but you. Yeah. This try read what you have. Because I need to like stay here to 6, so I just want to leave from 5. Yeah. It's 5. Yeah. If they are speaking earlier, yes. Otherwise, if you can take the yes. So if you can give this microphone to
Can I invite everyone to take your seats?
One of the panelists
Your panelist.
So you may have to switch it on and off.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I call to open the meeting of Roundtable 2, and I have the pleasure of co-chairing this roundtable alongside my civil society colleague, Dr. Muhammad Ali Lutfi. My co-chair, Dr. Lutfi, is the Director for Capacity Building and Advocacy of G3 ICT, and is an international development professional specializing in the inclusion of persons with disabilities across a wide range of developmental programming. He also serves as the representative of Disabled Peoples International at the United Nations, where he currently co-chairs the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities at the high-level political forum on the SDGs. He has served in different capacities at Disabled Peoples International and has worked as a consultant for a broad array of organizations. Today, we will together facilitate this roundtable discussion on the important issue concerning digital accessibility for persons with disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, as a prelude to the discussion today, let me take you through a snapshot of the current global normative framework, which consists of international human rights treaties and development instruments, and provides a comprehensive guidance on issues concerning the advancement of the rights of persons with disabilities in the context of digital accessibility. According to Article 9, subparagraph 1 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the Optional Protocol, state parties are required to take appropriate measures to ensure to persons with disabilities access on an equal basis with others to information and communications, including ICTs and systems, and other services, including electronic services and emergency services. In addition, according to Article 9, subparagraphs 2F to G, state parties shall also take appropriate measures to promote access for persons with disabilities to new information and communication technologies, including the internet. State parties shall also promote the design, development, production, and distribution of accessible information and communications technologies and systems at an early stage so that these technologies and systems become accessible at minimum cost. Article 21 also encourages mass media, including providers of information through the internet, to provide that information in accessible and usable formats for persons with disabilities. Through the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, member states have commitments to persons with disabilities in the context of promoting healthy lives and well-being for all at all ages. SDG Goal 9, Target 9C, in particular, calls member states to significantly increase access to information and communications technology and strive to provide universal and affordable access to the internet in least developed countries by 2030. ICT has the potential to assist persons with disabilities in overcoming barriers to communication, interaction, and information access. It can enable them to live independently thanks to increased access to employment, government services, and education. Mobile ICT devices can assist with communication and allow users with disabilities to use the form of communication that works best for them. However, such advantages are out of reach for many persons with disabilities. Increasing experiences from many countries have told us that all these existing gaps can be overcome when state parties take appropriate actions and interventions in line with the convention, for instance, by ensuring digital accessibility for persons with disabilities. Dear colleagues and friends, the year 2023 marks an important midpoint for reviewing the progress made in implementing the 2030 Agenda. As member states, United Nations entities, and other stakeholders continue to build back from the COVID-19 crisis, their efforts need to be accelerated towards implementing of the 2030 Agenda for all and implementing the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Against this backdrop, the Conference of State Parties, for the first time in its history, convenes a roundtable focusing on this important topic regarding digital accessibility for persons with disabilities. The roundtable will provide a unique opportunity for state parties and our stakeholder partners to review and reflect the current situation, progress and challenges, as well as opportunities to ensuring digital accessibility for persons with disabilities. We welcome you to share good practices and explore strategies to advance the rights of persons with disabilities in this important area. Now it is my great honor to recognize and extend a warm welcome to our distinguished panelists for this roundtable. Mr. Chong Kwek Bin, Technology Analyst, SG Enable Singapore. Mr. Laszlo Lovasi, Senior Research Fellow, Faculty of International Relations and Diplomacy, University of Public Service, Hungary. Mr. Konstantinos Stefanidis, President of the National Accessibility Authority of Greece. Ms. Roxana Widmer-Ilescu, Senior Coordinator for Digital Inclusion, Development Bureau, ITU. And John Mare Furaha, who will join us, who will not be with us in person here today, but we will still be hearing his valuable contribution today. And he's an advisor from the Rwanda Organization of Persons with Deaf Blindness. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to have a focused and interactive discussion in a moment, we will invite each of our panelists to make a presentation for 7 minutes. After the presentations, we will invite delegations and observers to join an interactive discussion, to either pose specific questions to panelists or to make brief comments that are relevant to the discussion of the roundtable. I kindly urge you to cooperate and refrain from making statements and to only pose questions or brief comments. Participants wishing to take the floor are invited to press the button on your desk to request for the floor, but this will be done only after the presentations are concluded and after the chair opens the floor for the interactive discussions. When you are given the floor, please unmute your microphone, identify your name and that of your delegation or organization before posing your questions. Please note all interventions shall be strictly limited to no longer than 2 minutes with no exception, to make the discussion interactive and allow for wide participation. Now let me turn to our distinguished panelists. Please note that when making your oral presentations and engaging in the interactive discussion, you are invited to address one or more of the questions as outlined in the background paper for the roundtable. Dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I will now hand over the floor to Dr. Mohammed Ali Lutfi, Civil Society Co-Chair, to moderate the panel discussion. Over to you, Dr. Lutfi.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Excellency Sushishwara Gunaratna, for setting the floor for the session today for our discussion. It's my great pleasure to be here on this panel today and among distinguished panelists to talk about digital accessibility rights of persons with disabilities. Dear colleagues, it's my great honor to introduce and invite our first panelist, Mr. Chong Kwek Bin. Mr. Chong Kwek Bin is a technology analyst with SG Enable in Singapore, who has steered significant initiatives made in public transport and accessibility for the disabled. These included audible traffic signals, which currently exceed 1,300 in number in Singapore, and in the introduction of the mobility assistance for persons with visual disabilities and special users mobile application in 2020. The application, which won an international award for the Land Transport Authority, alerts bus drivers to passengers in special needs who are boarding or alighting the bus. He is also the former head of employability and employment and advocacy at the Singapore Association of the Visually Handicapped. Mr. Chong Kwek Bin, you are welcome to make your presentation.
Thank you. Is it working? Mr. Chair, I am honored to share my views today on this important topic of digital accessibility. As our world becomes a more digital one, we need to make concerted efforts to ensure that no one, including persons with disabilities, gets left behind. The UN CRPD makes clear the critical role that digital accessibility plays in empowering persons with disabilities. It emphasizes that all of us must play our parts in creating an accessible digital space that enables the full participation and inclusion of persons with disabilities. To put the CRPD into action, Singapore developed the enabling master plans, our national roadmaps, which chart how we as a society can enable persons with disabilities to participate fully as integral and contributing members of society. For example, in the latest Enabling Master Plan 2030, Singapore set a target to ensure that 100% of high-traffic government websites are accessible by 2030. Additionally, policies and programs that help persons with disabilities to access assistive technology or other support services are also essential. Based on the Global Report on Assistive Technology, published by WHO and IAAP, the most frequently reported barrier to assistive technology was affordability. National policies that support persons with disabilities to purchase assistive technologies therefore play a key role. Singapore's Assistive Technology Fund, for example, which SG Enable administers, provides subsidies for persons with disabilities to purchase assistive technologies, enabling their independent living in this digital world. While we have made considerable strides towards digital accessibility, many barriers remain. In 2021, SG Enable, as the focal agency for disability and inclusion in Singapore, began engaging stakeholders across the private and public sectors to raise awareness and increase the adoption of e-accessibility practices, focusing in particular on reaching out to the healthcare, transport, banking, and government sectors. At the same time, we also built capabilities in persons with disabilities to perform e-accessibility audits and user testing of websites and mobile applications. Through the process of creating this e-accessibility ecosystem, however, we encountered three key barriers that prevented persons with disabilities from full digital accessibility. First, we have found that there is a general lack of awareness and lack of interest to achieve digital accessibility. Much effort was needed to move key sectors to adopt digital accessibility measures. It is important to convince businesses and organizations of the business case for digital accessibility and the benefits of doing so. Second, we have found that while frontline staff, such as developers, may be willing and interested to improve digital accessibility of their products, they can sometimes be constrained by the system in which they work in. Limited by time and resources, digital accessibility can end up taking a back seat among the company's list of priorities. They may also be limited by a lack of know-how. They might know that something is inaccessible, but lack the prerequisite knowledge to rectify the problem. These same issues were raised in the 2021 State of Digital Accessibility Report by Level Access, G3 ICT, and IAAP, which found that time and training were the top challenges faced by accessibility programs. Third, with e-accessibility being a growing and still nascent industry, we have had challenges expanding the pool of persons with disabilities who are able to perform e-accessibility audits. There are a few reasons for this, such as a lack of interest or the relatively technical nature of the work. And we will do more to improve this situation. It is therefore important to have key partners to help drive accessibility. In 2019, a small group of software developers from GovTech, Singapore's government agency overseeing the government's digital services banded together to find ways to make their digital products accessible. That ground-up initiative has since evolved into the accessibility enabling team, which is a key partner of SG Enable in our e-accessibility efforts. They ensure that the government's digital services are designed inclusively and that the unique needs and user patterns of persons with disabilities are meaningfully reflected in the product development process. The team provides Singapore's public service sector with consultancy services, open source tooling, policies and standards, education and outreach activities. They also develop their own open source automated testing tool, Purple Hats, which was listed on the UN's public registry of public goods, on the UN's public goods registry in 2022. From our experience implementing these digital accessibility, implementing digital accessibility efforts, we see that the road is long, but once we begin, we will make progress and find partners. I urge CRPD partners, member states, to take the lead in promoting accessibility in government digital services and consider how best to work with civil society, the private sector, and persons with disabilities to make this digital space an accessible one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bin, and congratulations to Singapore on its Master Plan 2030 on digital accessibility and for ensuring the creation of an ecosystem through raising awareness, ensuring affordability, and building partnership from the ground up, including persons with disabilities and developers together. Dear colleagues, it's my great honor to introduce and invite our second panelist, Mr. Laszlo G. Lovasi. Mr. Laszlo G. Lovasi is a senior research fellow with the Faculty of International Relations and Diplomacy at the National University of Public Service in Hungary. He also serves in the capacity of the Ministerial Commissioner for Strategic Government Research in Hungary. He has served as an international expert with the United Nations Human Rights Treaty System, UN Committee for the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and is the first person who is hard of hearing to obtain a law PhD in Hungary. Mr. Laszlo G. Lovasi, you are welcome to make your presentation.
Thank you. Your Excellency, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my sincere pleasure to be here with you today at this prestigious event. First of all, let me congratulate for organizing this very important topic and discussion. I believe all aspects and all relevant stakeholders are represented today, and I encourage them to voice their experience and concerns for further cooperation, coordination, and development. I'm not sure whether I could add more pieces of information or suggestions to elaborate further any topic today or any new topic never brought up before at all. We already heard the problems about a lot of general obstacles towards the standardization of web accessibility, the visible difference even among persons with disabilities in terms of educational level and their access to the internet, the challenge of the designing as well as the application of AI systems when it comes to persons with disabilities, not to mention the issue of the access to e-commerce and telehealth. We also have got the important and useful recommendations, helpful information of good practices of the state parties, as well as the practical guidelines from the World Bank, ITU, WHO, and all other international bodies in cooperation with the UN. And I think these efforts and achievements are altogether a good example for international work and cooperation. However, the most important issue might still be uncovered so far. What is the major barrier to making progress towards full digital accessibility? Regarding the standardization processes in the field of disability in general, a very long time also passed before the so-called standard on accessibility and usability of the built environment, functional requirements, was published. Reference number for your information is EN 17210, adopted in 2021. And even more 2 years went on when the adoption of the standard for equal opportunity, accessible and usable built environment. Technical performance criteria and specifications technical report happened. Reference number for your information is EN 17621. And believe it or not, this international standard issued just this year. Even though my country, Hungary, was among the forerunners in terms of disability-friendly legislation, aiming at a more accessible environment in 1998, it took more than 25 years for the international community to have an international standard on accessible built environment. This is a huge discrepancy between the given national legislation with its responsibility of the adaptation of the relevant laws and the lacking supportive standardization process. And to visualize this discrepancy, even the CRPD Convention was already more than 15 years old when these before-mentioned standards were adopted. And the ICT world is more complex, more comprehensive, and even more dynamic too. Most players are multinational companies with their own well-protected technical solutions and standards. I sincerely doubt that governments themselves in general in this competitive world have the strongest means to accelerate standardization if some of the companies are not committed to the unification of their solutions for standards. When it comes to public procurement, more specialized or more social requirements at national level could be seen or even communicated by players as discriminating prescription. Or, on the other hand, the small and middle enterprises employing the bigger chunk of the population could be ousted from the market due to the higher cost of public procurement. That is why it is important to see what tasks we are facing here in this field of standardization, since we shouldn't have to wait another 25 years, neither in the world nor Europe. And in terms of accessibility, means of reasonable accommodation should also be accessible for medium and small enterprises. This is getting more relevant not only for the customers with disabilities, but also in the case of employees with disabilities of the ICT sector, since fewer and fewer jobs will be without any IT part in the future. Finally, some words about the future, our future. Until recently, an unacceptable attitude prevailed. It is not my problem. approach was applied not long ago when spoke of or hinted at accessibility, since it affects just only 5 or 6% of the population. But up to 2030, almost 1/3 of the, for example, the EU population will be over 60 or 65. So even today, 40-something can slowly start thinking about what it will be like to be old and stay active. Because this is really our problem. Some people are ready for this, some less, or some do not at all. So I think it is a very important issue, and therefore it is our joint common problem. It is not up to us, it is up to you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Laszlo G. Lovosi, on your presentation and for highlighting the significance of international standardization and commitment of countries to that. And I would like to congratulate you and your country, Hungary, on being one of the forerunner countries on adopting standardization. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, it's my great honor to introduce and invite our third panelist, Mr. Konstantinos Stefanidis. Mr. Konstantinos Stefanidis is the president of the National Accessibility Authority in Greece. He is also a professor at the University of Crete and has participated in parliamentary subcommittee sessions on disability issues in Greece. He has pioneered research work in facilitating universal access and usability of emerging interactive products, applications, and services. He has published about 200 technical papers in scientific archival journals and proceedings with international conferences related to his field of expertise. Mr. Konstantinos Stefanidis, you are welcome to deliver your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. It is an honor for me to be here today. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, while in past decades we were concerned about citizens' access to the information society, nowadays access to technology encompasses not only information, but also goods and services in crucial sectors such as healthcare, education, employment, and justice. In my country, citizens are now able to interact with the government through over 1,500 digital governance services via the internet, eliminating the need for their physical presence in a public bureau, thus, amongst others, avoiding any potential physical accessibility barriers, but also rendering digital accessibility an absolute necessity. It is widely acknowledged that there is a pressing need for digital accessibility for all citizens, where the term all encompasses disabled and aging people, as well as individuals susceptible to being excluded due to other factors, such as gender and socioeconomic status, educational background and occupation, health, social connectedness, and the lack of appropriate infrastructures. Regardless of the underlying reasons for exclusion, it is of utmost importance that universal access be prioritized, as access to technology now means access to fundamental human rights, such as education, health, well-being, safety, and privacy. While most countries have already responded by enacting legislation that mandates the accessibility of web services and mobile applications, the key question is this: has digital accessibility actually been achieved? Regrettably, the quick answer is no, not yet, as evidenced by all national and international studies conducted until now. Considering that legislation is already in place and that web accessibility is a well-mapped area, featuring by now a wealth of principles, guidelines, and best practice about how to achieve this goal, as provided, for instance, by the W3C Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The obvious question is why we're still far off the target. A quick answer is that the endeavor is often perceived as rather complex, requiring developers and content creators to be familiar with composite guidelines, implying lack of thorough understanding of accessibility requirements and inadequate expertise. However, we need to go much deeper in order to pinpoint the many root causes for this situation. In Greece, we have now considered a national pilot project aiming to demonstrate how current methodological and regulatory shortcomings can be overcome in practice by June 2025. Under a forward-looking perspective, we also need to acknowledge that the gap between policies and practice is likely to further increase instead of decrease as we move from the by now well-defined web accessibility issues to the yet uncharted territory of digital accessibility of the emerging new tech interactive systems of extended reality and the intelligent environments. This is not only due to the additional complexity introduced by the technological demands for monitoring, reasoning, decision-making, and adaptation. The new key accessibility challenges will concern the user's interaction, the potentially high cognitive demands imposed, but also the fact that accessibility needs should be ensured simultaneously at multiple levels. First, accessibility of the digital devices by their owners as well as by other potential users with different requirements. Second, accessibility of the environment as a whole, specifically devices, content, and functions provided. And third, the combined accessibility of the virtual and the physical worlds. Moreover, advancing the agenda to artificial intelligence-enabled systems, additional concerns are raised regarding algorithmic bias against individuals or entire social groups, including persons with disabilities, older adults, and vulnerable individuals. In conclusion, the argument put forward here is for digital systems and technological environments to be designed following proactive, human-centered approaches, putting humans in the loop and in control of the entire system lifecycle, helping the emerging digital world become more human-centric and thus more inclusive. In this context, new appropriate legislation is required as an indispensable tool. Citing Aristotle, there is no difference between not having laws and not enforcing laws. So, in light of the arguments put forward, collective wisdom is required to ensure that digital accessibility is achieved in practice instead of being simply the letter of the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Stefanidis, for this very insightful presentation and for reminding us for the need of ensuring that the digital world should always be human-centric and offering some suggestions for that, particularly through universal design and ensuring equity of digital accessibility. Thank you very much. All right, dear colleagues, I would like to also now present or introduce, sorry, I'm here trying to, Yes. Let me now introduce the fourth speaker, Ms. Roxana Widmer-Elisko, Senior Coordinator for Digital Inclusion Development Bureau at the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, to deliver a presentation for up to 7 minutes. Ms. Elisko is the International Telecommunication Union she has been working for the ITU for the last 25 years, promoting digital inclusion for people with specific needs such as women, children, youth, persons with disabilities, older persons, and indigenous people. To support equal and equitable inclusion in digital society, economies, environment for everyone, she advocates for an intersectional approach and champions digital accessibility as universal design of technology. As focal point for ICT digital accessibility, she provides specialized advice on inclusive policies and strategies while developing essential ITU-D tools and resources to support member states and stakeholders' efforts in building a digitally inclusive world for all. Ms. Roxana, I welcome you to present your speech.
Thank you very much. Honorable members of the United Nations, esteemed delegates, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great privilege to be here today to discuss the critical role of digital accessibilities in implementing the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We live in a transformative era of information and communication technologies, ICTs, which have stimulated change and reshaped globally our socio-economic environment. As we ride this wave of rapid technological innovation and the exponential evolution of artificial intelligence, it is our shared responsibility to guarantee equal and equitable participation in the digital society and ensure that no one is left behind in this digital transformation process. ITU is committed to connecting the world. Through our efforts, we advocate and safeguard everyone's right to communicate within the digital realm. In pursuit of our goal to ensure digital inclusion for all people in the world, we ardently uphold the 3 A's, which include access, guaranteeing broadband access to ensure internet connectivity, affordability, ensuring cost-effective to internet service and to suitable devices, and finally, accessibility, which encompasses from formulating accessible policies and strategies through building accessible technology founded on principle of human-centric and universal design, such as smart technologies with inherent accessibility features, and finally, promoting the digital skills knowledge to effective use of devices and so empowerment of all end users through technology. For over 2 decades, the International Telecommunication Union, through the Telecommunication Development Bureau, has championed digital inclusion with a particular focus on ICT accessibility for the past 17 years. By working closely with our member states and over 900 sector members that include industry and private sector, academia, and all involved stakeholders, we strive to make technology available, affordable, and accessible to everyone. Our goal is to create a digital world that provides an equal and equitable environment free from whatever type of discrimination. Just as the ramp enables universal access in the physical world, digital accessibility is our ramp in the digital space. Therefore, we can say that ICT accessibility is the key enabler to achieve our overarching goal of digital inclusion. Communication is our fundamental right, which now extend in boundaries into the digital space, and our online rights should be the same as offline. Consequently, ICT accessibility mirroring the offline world must become the standard by design, encompassing every individual needs to use the technology irrespective of our age, gender, ability, socioeconomic status, level of education, or geographical location. As we work to build an inclusive digital society, it is essential to integrate digital accessibility into national and regional policies, strategies, and initiatives. Especially for persons with disabilities, accessible ICTs, which are ICT that have embedded accessibility features from design, jointly with assistive technology, which we trust will be accelerated and improved with the support of emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, should be technologically compatible and complementary to jointly contribute to equal participation of persons with disabilities in all aspects of life as active participants in the digital societies, economies, and environments. Finally, we can say that digital accessibility bridges the gap between the aspiration of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and their realization, and ITU is fully committed to contribute towards achieving this common goal. To support national, regional, and global efforts to build inclusive digital societies and environments, ITU designed, developed, and made available in our website an array of over 70 tools and resources. All our resources are free of charge in various UN languages, tailored to local contexts where applicable, and many of these are available in digital accessible formats. Our resources comprise guidelines, toolkits, thematic reports, online self-paced training courses, and also cover, in addition to technological progress, global trends such as urbanization and population aging. However, to successfully drive digital inclusion, we must also adapt to evolving nature of people, consider the complex realities faced by each individual. For instance, a young or older indigenous woman with disability faces multiple challenges related to digital inclusion and the use of technology. As the young of today become the old of tomorrow, and as each of us might experience in any moment of our life a temporary or a long-term disability, it is imperative that we adapt to people's evolving nature and life changes by eliminating the limitation of the work in silos and by adopting a holistic and intersectional approach. Ladies and gentlemen, to democratize the benefits of digital transformation, we must ensure that everyone can benefit equally and equitably from the existing digital products, services, and resources available in the digital space. This can only be achieved if this includes digital accessibility requirements from design. As we look toward the future, our strategy must focus on mainstreaming ICT digital accessibility across all socioeconomic sectors. We must identify awareness-raising efforts, ensure the implementation of ICT accessibility policy strategies, and strengthen knowledge and develop national capacities and professionals on this important topic. Picture a world where digital accessibility is embedded in education. It guarantees equal access to learning resources. In employment, it fosters participation in the labor market. In healthcare, it provides equal access to vital information and service. In transportation, it enhances freedom of mobility for everyone. In financial services, provide us the opportunity to execute independently our financial operation from safe environments like our homes. In retail, e-commerce, entertainment, and media, if all of this built and delivered in digital accessible formats, it ensures that everyone can equally benefit from the services and application, and the possibilities are infinite. I want to conclude with a call for action. Building an inclusive digital society requires our collective commitment. By joining and jointly championing accessible and universally designed technology, we are setting the foundation for a global society that embodies inclusivity, equality, and equity leaving behind a digital barrier-free and a better digital world for all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Roxana Widmer-Elisko, for your excellent presentation and for ITU's efforts on democratizing digital accessibility for all and offering all these resources and tools to all stakeholders to make sure that all stakeholders can enhance their efforts on promoting digital accessibility, and also on highlighting the significance of, or the cross-sectoral role of digital accessibility and their impact on lives of persons with disabilities. Now I would like to, dear delegates and civil society friends, and to thank all of the panelists for their contribution, for their wonderful and excellent and insightful presentations. And I now hand over the co-chairmanship back to Mr. Sujishwara Gunaratna, Vice President of the conference, who will continue to moderate our meeting this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Lutfi. Dear colleagues, it's my honor to introduce and invite our final panelist, Mr. John Mari Furaha. Mr. John Mari Furaha is an advisor and board member of the Rwanda Organization of Persons with Deafblindness in Rwanda. He is a strong advocate for empowerment of persons with deafblindness in the areas of education, health, rehabilitation services, socio-economic development, and communication. He has contributed to work that progresses rights of persons with disabilities in Rwanda by being an agent of change and by advocating for rights and dignity for persons with disabilities as human beings. While Mr. John Mari Furaha is unable to be with us physically today, he shall make his presentation via online platform to be displayed on the podium shortly.
Hello to everyone from different countries. I'm Furaha Jean-Marie. My sign name is like this. I'm from Rwanda Organization of Persons with Deaf Blindness. I'm an advisor in the board. Today, we have the topic saying that assistive technology and persons with disabilities, including persons with deaf blindness. Globally, persons with deaf blindness represent 0.222% of the population. Most of the challenge they are facing today, there is no education for them, no employment for them. Also, there is exclusion in their communities. Let's talk about the importance of accessibility and assistive devices for persons with deaf blindness. It helps them to enjoy their right like others. It helps persons with deaf blindness to enjoy human rights adopted by UNCRPD. Enhances our social inclusion, improve independence and participation in different community activities. To create greater access to education for persons with deaf blindness, example, Orbit readers, digital braille display, and computer by unlocking literacy. It allows deaf-blind students to learn like others without disabilities. It promotes education, and employment for persons with deaf blindness. It keeps people connected, especially in rural area. For example, I, Furaha Jamari, can communicate using Braille, write not using Braille, and other assistive technologies. The challenges persons with deaf blindness are facing in technology are poor implementation measures on persons with deaf blindness. Deaf blindness has not yet been accepted as a distinct type of disability. Lack of services and communication barriers. Gender-based violence. Websites are not accessible to persons with deaf blindness. Limited assistive technology devices to facilitate access to the content, including in education. Lower level of awareness of accessible digital technology among decision and policymakers. Limitation of skilled personnel in community. Possible solutions to facilitate persons with deaf blindness to access to digital technologies. CRPD calls the government to make new accessible technologies for persons with deaf blindness that are not high cost. International cooperation and the private sector need to invest in inclusive assistive technology for persons with deaf blindness. All tools should be made and used universally, including persons with deaf blindness. Specific efforts need to be considered in research. What governments should do on persons with deaf blindness? Accept deaf blindness as distinct disability category. Put in place clear implementation measures and policies to protect the right of persons with deaf blindness. What governments and international corporation actors should do? First, exchange and cooperation in inclusive research. Provide technical and economic assistance. Make financing and investment more accessible to persons with deaf blindness. Providing sign language and assistive devices in schools. Training services providers, including IT sector. In conclusion, There is no need to reinvent the wheel, going all over the process and making all the mistakes. There should be more emphasis on exchange and partnership in all countries. In terms of policies, standards, and regulations, but good practice to promote inclusion of persons with deaf blindness. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to be with you. Bye-bye.
I thank Mr. John Mari Furaha for a very insightful presentation on an area of disability that needs greater focus and attention. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we now move to the second phase of this roundtable, that is the interactive discussion between the panelists and delegations. As we informed you at the outset of this meeting, in the following segment of about an hour or 55 minutes, there will be opportunity for delegations and other observers to request the floor, to either pose specific questions to panelists or make a brief comment relevant to the current discussion. For this purpose, delegates and other participants may press the button at your desk to request to take the floor. All interested delegations and accredited observers from the UN entities and national human rights institutions are also able to inscribe. In a moment, on a first-come, first-served basis, we will call and give the floor to the first 5 inscribed government delegations whose microphones shall be unmuted when they are given the floor. When you are given the floor, please first identify yourself and the title of the delegation or organization you are representing. Please either pose specific questions to panelists or make a brief comment relevant to the current discussion. Please do not read prepared statements. All interveners may speak no more than 2 minutes. With no exception, I will count on everybody for your cooperation to keep the time limit. In order to ensure the process to be inclusive, the Bureau has decided that after every 5 state parties speak during the interventions, 1 non-governmental organization, 1 UN entity, and 1 National Human Rights Institute will be given the floor, and the floor is now open for inscriptions. Okay. I now recognize the distinguished representative from Qatar as the first in my list, and I invite you to speak. The floor is yours.
Thank you for allowing me the floor. I'm a youth representative of Qatar, السيد الرئيس, أصحاب المعالي والسعادة, السيدات والسادة.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the digital gap which persons with disabilities experience is a reality that we cannot deny. And the problem that we have in that particular situation deals with accessibility to technology which could provide services to people with disabilities. Qatar bases itself on a knowledge economy and attaches particular importance to persons with disabilities. For example, I'd like to stress that digital access has reached a percentage of 89% when it comes to teaching and 83% in the public sector. My country is first in the world when it comes to the CLEAV Index, which is published by the GCITC. Qatar is considered a part of the first 10 states to ensure access to technology. And that is how Qatar provides accessibility services, services that provide accessibility to digital technology for persons with disabilities, and the government provides support to that. These services involve all kinds of disabilities and are provided free of charge through specialists who deal directly with the persons concerned in order to introduce them to the digital world. My country also developed a digital application. The speaker was interrupted.
Qatar, and I now invite the distinguished youth representative of Morocco to take the floor.
Thank you for giving me the floor as youth delegate. We hope that more facilities be given to youth delegates, especially youth with disabilities, to allow them to participate and share their perspectives. Mr. Chair, we live in a global digital world. COVID-19 exacerbated the existing inequalities and unveiled the digital divide. At the height of the pandemic, the world population went to a halt. School and work went remote. Around the world, people with disabilities, including youths, suffered from the digital divide, from the lack of access to assistive technology and the lack of access to affordable devices. With all the technological advances and the political will expressed worldwide, we regret to see that people with disabilities are still not guaranteed access to affordable, assistive, and accessible devices that respond to their specific needs. They continue to be left behind this digitalized world. As a youth delegate, I would like to highlight the particular challenges that face children and youth with disabilities, especially girls, including those in remote or rural areas who face specific challenges during the pandemic and continue to do so in terms of accessing electronic devices and quality internet. This impacted their ability to continue their education remotely. Consequently, many of them had to leave school. Some were forced to child early and forced marriage. Others went through early pregnancies or faced cycles of violence, abuse, mental health, and violations of their human rights. There is an urgent need for action. People with disabilities will be left behind if we do not join our collective efforts and take urgent, concrete actions with everyone on board: decision makers, the private sectors, the business actors, and civil society. Finally, I thank you again for the opportunity given to me at
I thank the distinguished representative of Morocco. I now invite the distinguished representative of Japan to take the floor. Japan, you have the floor.
Camera has to be focused on here.
Can we have the camera on the speaker, please?
So,
I am deaf and from Japan. I am pleased to announce that I am running for election as a member to the Committee on Rights of Persons with Disabilities at the elections to be held here in New York in 2024. In its concluding observation of the initial report of Japan, In its concluding observation of the initial report of Japan, the CRPD noted with appreciation Japan's legislation concerning acquisition and the use of information by persons with disabilities, which stipulates that the national and the local government should support the development and provision of information communication devices to help persons with disabilities receive sufficient information. In Japan, companies have developed automatic speech recognition apps which are starting to be used by deaf people. Concurrently, companies have also launched video call services with remote sign language interpretation. However, not many people are familiar with such apps and video call services, and sometimes are even hesitant to use them. I would therefore like to ask how we can raise social awareness on the emergence of such technologies for persons with disabilities. Another challenge for persons with disabilities is their access to telehealth, as was stated in the Secretary General's report. Local governments might consider financial support to hospitals to offer telehealth services, and any good practices you can share with us in this regard would be appreciated.
I thank the distinguished representative of Japan for his statement, and I call on the distinguished representative of Ecuador to take the floor.
Buen día con todos. Mi nombre
Good morning. My name is Pedro Galarza, and I represent Ecuador. And the project that my colleague mentioned from Japan is basically a project that influenced Ecuador in its policy for persons with disabilities. And I'd like to talk about Ecuador's experience. We are aware of the fact that communication is vital for interpersonal relations. And thus, Ecuador is implementing a communication policy where, with the use of technology and with ICTs, people with disabilities can relate to each other in every aspect of their lives, both in having access to public services as well as private services in defending their rights. And like Japan, we would like to receive recommendations and suggestions as to how to enhance this great project for persons with disabilities.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ecuador, and I give the floor now to the distinguished representative of Iraq. You have the floor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أحمد الأسدي وزير العمل والشؤون الاجتماعية في العراق.
In the name of God, the merciful, ladies and gentlemen, may God's blessing be upon you. The government of Iraq, through its Ministry of Labor, has always made an effort to eliminate or overcome the challenges when it comes to accessibility for persons with disabilities in cooperation with the Communication and Medium Commission within the Department of Inclusive Services. A system was developed making it possible to strengthen accessibility for persons with disabilities to ICTs. And this in order to overcome the social, environmental, and legislative obstacles that prevent persons with disabilities from interacting with each other and with other components of society. We provide inclusive information in terms of technology, and also with respect to education. And this involves the following. First of all, we provide mobile telephone services adapted specifically to the needs of persons with disabilities, as well as automatic ticket machines adapted for persons with disabilities. We have set up advisory committees in cooperation with other Arab countries in order to transfer technology and to take the necessary measures to improve the accessibility of persons with disabilities in schools and in the educational sector, generally speaking. We are making an effort to guarantee connectivity before providing those mobile telephone services. We also provide media content which is adapted. Secondly, we make an effort to create a culture of inclusive education, and on an equal footing, we work with a large number of partners and with specialized committees. The microphone has been turned off.
I thank the distinguished representative of Iraq. I'd like to now invite the first non-governmental organization to take the floor, and I invite the representative from At Scale. You have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my name is Caradwen Johnson and I am representing AT Scale, the Global Partnership for Assistive Technology. Accessibility and access to assistive technology for persons with disabilities is a human right, imperative in line with the Convention, and yet, in low-income countries, on average, only 10% have the assistive technology they need. In high-income countries, the inverse is often true, with 90% access. This inequity is unacceptable. While the need for digital assistive technology is large, its potential is equally great. An AT Scale supported study on digital devices as assistive technology recently found that when persons with disabilities have access to accessibility features, they tend to make higher use of important mobile services such as online banking, news platforms, and social media. This opens up opportunities for education and professional development and participation in many other realms of life. Currently, though, there is a widespread lack of understanding regarding the use and importance of digital assistive technology. AT Scale is working to catalyse action to change this. Our mission is to reach 500 million more people with life-changing assistive technology by 2030, and this includes digital assistive technology. Currently, we have 2 catalytic projects underway. A research project with Google and the Global Disability Innovation Hub aims to demonstrate the benefits of smartphones and articulate what they can empower persons with disabilities to achieve. And in partnership with UNICEF, we're developing open-source text-to-speech software in 4 underrepresented languages.
I thank the representative of AT Scale for her statement. Since we do not have, as of yet, a national human rights institution or a UN entity requesting the floor, we will go back to the state parties who are requesting the floor, and I now invite the representative from the European Union to take the floor.
Good. Because I am at 1 minute 25, 30.
We submitted.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. Yes. So, my name is Inmaculada Placencia Porrero, and I'm representing the European Union. Mr. President, digital accessibility developments offer a lot of opportunities for unrestricted participation in society for persons with disabilities. The European Union has adopted a set of comprehensive accessibility policy, standards and legislation, combining accessibility obligations with a strong enforcement so that economic operators place in the market digital accessible products and services. Such a law as the European Accessibility Act, that also requires interoperability with assistive technology, is combined with accessibility obligations in public procurement and accessibility requirements when using certain EU funds. Ensuring accessibility to the existing digital opportunities is at the core of the strategy of the rights of persons with disabilities. Nevertheless, full digital accessibility has not been reached, making access on equal basis with others for persons with disabilities far from being a reality. More action is still needed to ensure that persons with disabilities can participate in the continuously evolving digital world. To support the implementation of accessibility legislation across the EU, we have launched a new resource centre, Accessible EU, aiming to enhance capacity of professionals, raising awareness, and providing training for better implementation of digital accessibility. Mr. President, the rising importance of artificial intelligence and the metaverse and others is increasing the opportunities for persons with disabilities, but also raises the risk for discrimination. Can the panel share the views on how accessibility to the emerging digital opportunities, including artificial intelligence, can be ensured, including preventing?
I thank the distinguished representative of the European Union. I now pass the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom. You have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, distinguished delegates, I'm the Minister of State for Disabled People, Health and Work representing the United Kingdom Government, and I'm delighted to take part in this very important roundtable discussion. And as has been so widely recognised, we as a government recognise that digital skills and access are necessary to participate fully in society. And our UK Digital Strategy 2022 outlines our vision to enable everyone in the UK to benefit from digital innovation. Alongside this, our accessibility regulations ensure that websites and mobile apps are operable, understandable and robust for all users. And I also want our government communications to set the standard and to lead the way, and that's why through the implementation of the British Sign Language Act, we are including sign language users, British Sign Language users in the process of implementation to make sure that we get this right. To advance digital inclusion for all, the government is also continuing to invest in digital infrastructure. One example is the £2.5 million Digital Lifeline Fund. Launched in 2021, it provides free devices, data and digital support to over 5,000 people with learning disabilities who cannot afford to get online. Globally, our AT 2030 programme tests and delivers proven models of what works to improve access to affordable, life-changing assistive technology. This includes trialling, testing and researching digital solutions to improve the inclusion of disabled people. And I was delighted to announce yesterday that the UK is investing a further £31 million into the AT 2030 programme, which takes our total investment in it to £51 million, all of which will be match funded by our partners through investment from the private sector and governments and contributions in cash and in kind. In partnership with the Clinton Health Access
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom, and I now pass the floor to the distinguished representative of Egypt.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm Iman Karim, the head of the Council for Persons with Disabilities, NCPD. ألزم القانون المصري رقم 10 سنة 2018 بشأن حقوق الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة بنفاذ
Law number 10 of 2010 concerning persons with disabilities has favored access for persons with disabilities to digital technology, including access to the internet and to electronic services. The obstacles that hinder the accessibility for persons with disabilities to these technological means is reflected in the lack of infrastructure and assistance techniques, apart from other obstacles and disparities between the different regions. Those difficulties are accentuated when it comes to women and girls with disabilities. That affects productivity. I'd like to review the accomplishments that we have had in this area in Egypt. In cooperation with the Ministry of Telecommunications, a national strategy was launched for persons with disabilities, and it's coordinated around access to technology in order to have access to services, and in order to ensure the integration of persons with disabilities and their access to information in cooperation with the Ministry of Communications in Alexandria, as well as the General Library branch. The second phase of this project is being carried out as we speak. The Global Conference of Telecom Issues. This conference was organized by the International The microphone has been cut off.
Representative of Egypt, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Guyana to take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Ganesh Singh, Guyana Delegation. Digital access is essential for daily living. For persons with disabilities, this is more important, as we depend on technology for our independence and to bridge the communication gap. Guyana has begun mainstreaming disability in the digital field. This is evident through various policies and programs. These include skills training for persons with disabilities in the field of information technology. Some of the areas are social media marketing, web development, and use of computer. These programs are implemented by various government ministries and training agencies. The majority of graduates are now employed. The Ministry of Education has ensured that digital technology has been included in the classroom for learning of children with disabilities. The Ministry of Education also continues to support the Guyana Society for the Blind, a virtual Caribbean Examination Council program for persons with disabilities. Again, the majority of persons are now employed. Recently, taxes on mobile devices are no longer there, so persons with disabilities can access these devices at a lower cost. Chair, digital technology is important for all of us. And the government of Guyana, in collaboration with the organizations for persons with disabilities, has committed to ensure that digital inclusion for persons with disabilities is part of the digital field. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Guyana, and now we invite the distinguished representative of Mexico to take the floor.
Gracias. Mi nombre es Mauricio Reyes.
Thank you. I'm Mauricio Reyes, and I'm part of the Mexican delegation. The commitment to guarantee digital accessibility for persons with disabilities is an important task, which requires eliminating barriers that prevent access to assistive technologies. This challenge urges us to adopt innovative and effective measures, which would make it possible to ensure that no aspect within the digital environment is undetectable or invisible to persons with disabilities. In 2011, Mexico took an important step in adopting the general law for the inclusion of persons with disabilities, which promoted relevant measures to ensure digital access of persons with disabilities to information and communication in all fields and in urban and rural environments. Likewise, the National Council for the Prevention of Discrimination in Mexico, the CONAPRED, and the Mexican Institute of Access to Information and Data Protection drew up a guide for public action called Accessible Websites, which consists of guidelines focused on guaranteeing the rights to non-discrimination and the right to have access to information on websites. Institutions such as the Supreme Court of Justice, as well as the Federal Institute of Telecommunications, are playing crucial roles. While the court provides counseling for inclusive programs, the Federal Institute of Telecommunications established accessibility guidelines, including internet portals which are accessible, as well as specialized telephone assistance. In our interconnected and technological society, equal opportunity and access and in the use of digital tools is a fundamental pillar. Digital accessibility is not only a human right, but also a principle of equity and social justice. In eliminating barriers in the digital sphere, we will be allowing technologies to act as transformative and equitable tools in the lives of persons with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Mexico. I now invite the distinguished representative from the World Blind Union to take the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Workman. I am the CEO of the World Blind Union. I want to thank the co-chairs as well as the panelists for sharing their expertise. With more and more essential services moving to the digital world, this is really an important discussion that we're having today. And one point that I've heard this afternoon that I'd like to echo is that assistive technology and digital accessibility really go hand in hand. So you can have a situation where you have access to a screen reader, but not be able to use the website because it's not designed accessibly. Similarly, you can have a scenario where the website you want to access is designed really well, it's fully accessible, but where you don't have access to the technology, to the screen reader, So you really need both. But there is a third necessary component as well, and that is training on how to use the assistive technology. So I'll just give you a quick example. I think there's an intuitiveness to using an iPhone. You know, it's really quite remarkable how very young children can pick up these devices and start using them. But I can assure you that using an iPhone with VoiceOver, the built-in screen reader, is not nearly as intuitive. It takes time, it takes practice, a lot of patience, and ideally training from some sort of assistive technology professional or perhaps peer-to-peer training, but really some type of training is necessary if you're going to be comfortable using the assistive technology. And in my experience, the issue of training on how to use these products is sometimes forgotten or overlooked. And so I wanted to flag the importance of training on assistive technology and emphasize its importance. So thank you again for the interesting discussion.
I thank the representative of the World Blind Union for very insightful comments. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running out of time. Time doesn't usually run out on us, but we run out of time. But we will try to accommodate as many delegations as possible. I know there are a lot of microphones switched on, so please bear with us if we are not able to accommodate you, but we will try to our level best to accommodate all of you. I now invite the distinguished representative of Turkey to take the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and the panelists for their presentations. Technological developments have created different formats for accessing information, services, and products. The accessibility of these formats are crucial for the realization of the human rights of persons with disabilities. In this respect, Turkey has taken significant steps to ensure digital accessibility. Particularly, the e-government system has been established, which provides an effective and efficient access to all public services online, in accordance with the international accessibility standards. Moreover, a barrier-free communication center, namely ILAM, was established in 2022 to provide 24/7 translation support for sign language users in case of need in accessing all services, including public services. Video calls are provided in order to ensure that the rights such as health, education, employment, accessibility, and access to justice can be realized. Trainings on web content accessibility are organized in order to increase the knowledge and awareness of institutions on designing web pages. In this context, around 3,700 professionals from 750 institutions participated in 14 workshops organized in the last year. In order to further our steps towards being an inclusive and sustainable society, the 2030 Barrier-Free Vision document was adopted in 2021 as a roadmap, and its first implementation tool, the National Action Plan on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, was announced in 2022. With the vision document and its action plan, it's aimed to increase the accessibility of ICTs and electronic service systems as well. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Turkey, and I now turn the floor over to the representative of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Merci beaucoup pour la...
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I'm Minister in charge of persons with disability in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I want to make sure that different types of persons with disabilities are taken into account in adjusting technologies to make them accessible. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have put in place a program for digital access and digitizing sign language and strengthened cooperation and exchanges of know-how with various stakeholders. We know that we're not at the same level in terms of digital technology as some of the most advanced countries, but it is a very important issue for us, and we are trying to build up cooperation with partners to receive assistance to make sure that persons with disabilities, particularly in developing countries like ours, where people are sometimes not only in ill health but are poor and have no access to the right technologies. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I now turn the floor over to the distinguished representative of South Africa.
Honorable Chairperson, distinguished delegates, South Africa developed the white paper on the integrated ICT policy in 2017 that promotes for digital inclusion, enabling participation of persons with disability in the entire value chain of information technology processes. We are currently finalizing the digital transformation and digital inclusion frameworks, and they focus specifically on persons with disability to ensure that they are prioritized in terms of 77% for employment equity target, 7% procurement spend, and 7% in small, medium, and micro enterprise support and development in the ICT sector. South Africa developed a digital economic strategy to promote the participation of all its citizens in the digital economy, including persons with disability. We also experience our fair share of challenges. To date, accessibility to local produce accessible products and service in terms of technology is a severe challenge in South Africa. We experience challenge in terms of cost to communicate cost in terms of data and access to internet. We also experience challenges in terms of skills in understanding, training, and utilization of new technology, such as artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and virtual reality. For this reason, focus is being given to digital inclusion in terms of the learning, living, play, and work environments to ensure that persons with disabilities are able to access and participate in all. In conclusion, the aim is to digitize South Africa in terms of government, private sector, and society, leaving no one behind. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa, and I now pass on the floor to the distinguished representative of Malta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. Digital accessibility is the key priority for Malta and is tackled in Objective 4 in our National Disability Strategy, while also being covered by our National Autism Strategy, which mandates wider recognition and the use of tools, such as the area of augmentative and alternative communications. Action 4.4 of the National Disability Strategy additional mandates the completion and publication of the Accessibility Information Policy, following relevant consultation process by the Commission for the Rights of Persons with Disability. We also were one of the first countries to transpose the European Union's Accessibility Act, which mandates digital accessibility in a number of different sectors, while adhering to European standards covered by the Union Web Accessibility Directive. Government has additionally pledged to set up a funding scheme to support businesses not currently covered by domestic or European legislation in making their digital platforms accessible for all. Digital Agency Support Malta State Disability Service Provider is currently carrying out market research regarding accessible artificial intelligence technologies for persons with disabilities to enhance independent living, with the scope of informing the creation of financial assistance scheme for purchasing and assessing such technologies, one of that promotes independent living. Furthermore, the agency recognizes that digital accessibility is a sufficient factor for independent living and inclusion in the community. Accordingly, persons with disability are encouraged to be supported and to make use of information and communications technology and systems, including internet and mobile devices within the various services. Training and support to access training is also provided in this regard. The Commission for the Rights of Persons with Disability in Malta, Malta's independent monitoring mechanism for the Convention, runs a focus group for disabled persons and their organizations in respect of monitoring implementation of the EU Web Accessibility Directive, with the participation of the Malta Communications Authority.
I thank the distinguished representative of Malta, and I give the floor to the representative of Malaysia. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the government of Malaysia is cognizant of the rights and needs of persons with disabilities to access information, communication, and technology. The Plan of Action for Persons with Disabilities 2016-2022 includes initiatives that provide support and assistance for persons with disabilities in the form of sign language translators, audio description, and augmentative alternative communication AAC. Since August 2020, Malaysia's oldest public broadcasting station, the Radio Television Malaysia RTM, has gradually increased usage of AAC as a service to support persons with disabilities that have more than one disability. Another initiative is an ICT and multimedia program held at community-based rehabilitation CBR centers, which comprises portals and courseware developed for persons with disabilities. It aims to enable persons with disabilities to have access to computers and ICT services, as well as encourages full participation of parents and communities to assist persons with disabilities in the learning and rehabilitation process through ICT. Malaysia has also an online registration system for persons with disabilities known as MyDaftar OKU, launched in 2021. Registration is made easy through the use of a QR code and is part of the efforts to improve the existing registration system. As of December 2022, a total of 68,361 persons with disabilities have been registered via this platform. The government strives to further improve digital accessibility for all persons with disabilities in ensuring barrier-free access to information, communication, and technology. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Malaysia, and we are indeed running out of time, and I invite the last speaker from the European Disability Forum. You have the floor. European Disability Forum, you have the floor.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the European Disability Forum, we would like to stress two key aspects regarding digital accessibility. First, that persons with disabilities have digital rights, and that we should work hand in hand with digital rights activists to ensure that accessibility becomes a core element of digitalization, just like data protection, privacy, or cybersecurity. Accessibility is a digital right, and as such, it must be regulated by policymakers in line with the CRPD, so all tech developers consider and respect it. In the European Union, and thanks to the advocacy of the European Disability Movement, we adopted an ambitious legislation in this domain, the European Accessibility Act, and we are about to revise and hopefully improve the Accessibility Technical Standard 301549, which is already used by an increasing number of tech companies and countries around the world. Second, although we recognize the huge potential of artificial intelligence in enhancing digital accessibility and supporting our independent living and participation, we urge state parties to set the boundaries on the uses of AI. Even a low-risk artificial intelligence tools which seems harmless can automatize discrimination against persons with disabilities, with the aggravating circumstance that in many cases we will not even know that we've been discriminated against. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, we call for caution, regulation, and ethical uses of AI. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative from the European Disability Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we have received a large number of comments and questions from the floor, and I would now turn to our distinguished panelists to respond to the questions raised or the comments received. Each panelist will speak for about 2 minutes, and I'll start with handing over the floor to Mr. Chong Kwek Bin. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to comment that perhaps what I've already mentioned in my statement earlier can be shared again with some of our distinguished delegates who have posted questions, comments. For example, it is important for national policies and programs to be implemented which help persons with disabilities gain access to assistive technology and other support services. So the policies can involve making technology and support services more affordable. It can also be about promoting awareness and awareness of such services so that they can be better adopted and recognized. I would also like to comment that also repeat my urge to all state parties to take the lead in adopting digital accessibility so that we can then urge all other stakeholders, including private sector, to also adopt assistive technology to help persons with disabilities. I would also recognize, as I've said, once we begin the journey, we will find many partners, and I'm happy that from what the comments have been posted that there are many partners here, and I hope to be able to connect with some of you to learn further from your achievements and progress. I think I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chong Kwek Bin, for your response. I now invite Mr. Laszlo Loasi to make his response.
Thank you. First of all, I'm in a very difficult situation because it's almost impossible to pick or highlight any comment because all were important and relevant for today's discussion. But let me begin by my remarks by referring to Mr. Furuha's our deaf-blind panelist remarks about the importance of innovation in CRPD because inclusive research is one of the backbone of the convention, and therefore research centers, as mentioned, must be welcomed in this regard. And in relation to this, the close partnership between governments and innovative companies and industries also welcome for their mutual interest as well, because we have a very good example at the hand when it comes to history of innovation, because if we think about the story of touchscreen technology, which was originally developed for the blind users and customers, and it is important to understand the conclusion of this story in terms of innovation, because what is necessary for persons with disability is also convenient for all. So accessibility is not an unnecessary or inconvenient obligation, but a great investment for all. And let me finalize my remarks with the two topics: the young people's importance, because sustainability in aging, in terms of sustainability in aging, young people with disabilities also play a crucial role in terms of providing a better future, and more information shall be provided about accessibility in general, because accessible solutions sometimes are not aware of, persons with disabilities are not quite often aware of the available accessible solutions. And finally, in the field of inclusive education, it is important to realize that the general comment of the CRPD number 4 adopted in 2016 is the first general comment adopted in the history of CRPD with references to technology and technological aspects, and that's why it is worth considering translating this document into your national language. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Laszlo Loasi for your response. I now invite Mr. Konstantinos Stefanidis to make his response.
Thank you, Chair. We have appreciated all comments from the distinguished delegates. The argument that we have put forward earlier is for all digital products and services to be designed following proactive, human-centered approaches, putting humans, including people with disabilities, in the loop and in control of the entire system life cycle. However, this can only be achieved if software engineers around the world are appropriately trained and, where necessary, retrained, including training in the use of assistive technologies, which is lacking from most, but not all, university curricula. At the same time, the international scientific community is also called upon to action along a multitude of dimensions. One of them, which has been mentioned, is to advance equal access to artificial intelligence-based technological solutions, mitigating algorithmic bias and promoting explainability, predictability, reliability, and trustworthiness. For example, face or voice recognition algorithms are trained with datasets that do not include people with disabilities, who might have different facial or vocal characteristics. Imagine an AI-empowered disease detection system which fails to detect the disease simply due to the disability of the person being examined. For example, a person with Down syndrome. In conclusion, the road in front of us is full of challenges, but also promises. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Konstantinos Stefanidis, for your response. I now invite Ms. Roxana Widmer-Ilescu to make her response.
Thank you, Chair. It's a little bit difficult after everything was said, and thank you everyone for your comments. I believe that several issues were reiterated here on policy and regulatory measure, of course, as everybody mentioned here. We also work with the member states, but I do believe that the civil society has an important role here to also foster a little bit, and will not say to oblige, but to make policy and decision makers in their respective countries to accelerate this. The European Commission also mentioned the existence of appropriate policies and strategies and European Accessibility Act. So I would say let's try to not duplicate efforts, and let's try to use the existing legislation, standards, good practices to try to adapt to our environment, to our countries, and try to accelerate this jointly. I also retain that the colleagues before said that the need to let's say, provide knowledge in the use of assistive technologies. I think this is a problem because there are not too many providers on this knowledge. So the civil society, I would suggest to consider to take the lead on this and to try to develop these capacities and help us all to do this further. And finally, affordability. I think we all have to be very careful when we say access to devices, and we think actually to affordability to the devices. So to try to keep the notions as they are. When it is access, it is internet access, connectivity. When it's affordability to device. So I think, again, affordability of devices, we have to also encourage industry manufacturer to make an effort, while the government also to ensure that they have they facilitate access to provision of such devices and assistive technology to persons with disabilities. There are a lot to say. I think we're all passionate here, but perhaps we can also take offline a further discussion. Thank you for your contribution and interest.
Thank you, Ms. Roxana Widmer-Ilescu, for your response. Mr. Jean-Marie Furaha is unable to attend the conference in person, but we deeply appreciate the valuable contribution that he made earlier to the roundtable discussion. It is my pleasure now to invite my co-chair, Dr. Muhammad Ali Lutfi, to deliver his final remarks.
Thank you, Excellency. How wonderful to hear such passionate voices of delegates on their countries' and organizations' commitment to promoting digital accessibility for persons with disabilities and bridging the digital divide to ensure more inclusive technologies for persons with disabilities and all. However, I would like to note that commitment has been always there. We have noticed through the DARE Index issued by G3ICT in 2020 that more than 80% of countries shown, that surveyed countries, 137 countries that have that were surveyed, showed strong commitment to digital accessibility through adopting constitutional languages and regulations and laws on digital on disability and digital accessibility. But once we go to the implementation capacity and outcomes, the interest or the percentage or the rating of these countries decreases. Hopefully in the upcoming DARE Index 2023, hopefully by the end of the year, we will see that this is changing. Our distinguished panelists have explained to us the know-how of how to promote digital accessibility and ensure digital inclusion for persons with disabilities through adopting and implementation of standards, international standards, also ensuring that affordability is a key element in promoting digital accessibility, making sure that persons with disabilities have access to accessible technology and digital accessibility. However, we would like to see more commitment from countries and delegations and organizations to promoting these strategies. We saw in the DARE Index of 2020 that only 44 countries have adopted universal service obligations on digital accessibility for persons with disabilities, and only 18% of these countries have also adopted disability inclusion strategy in their public procurement policies. But I would like to emphasize one very important thing, and I heard voices of organizations of persons with disabilities that they are all also passionate to be part of decision-making on digital accessibility. Their Index 2020 showed that only 26% of countries involve organizations of persons with disabilities in decision-making processes regarding digital accessibility. We need to see this increasing, especially that after 3 years or 4 years of COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen how digital accessibility is important for persons with disabilities and for all in accessing information and services, products, and public goods. So we urge you all to work together. International cooperation and partnerships are strongly encouraged, and we are here asking you all to take advantage of all resources and tools that my colleague Ms. Lisko from ITU has talked about, and also all the strategies and the suggestions like Dr. Stefanidis talked about, and we would like to also see more best practices like the one in Singapore, and also the commitment of the country of Hungary towards standardization that we have heard from our colleague Mr. Lovosi. So I welcome you all to more commitment, I welcome you all to more partnership, and I mostly encourage you or welcome you all to see more inclusion of persons with disabilities and their organizations in decision-making processes on digital accessibility. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad Ali Lutfi, for the very inspiring remarks. It is finally now left to me to try to summarize the discussion with the help of the Secretariat, who has been keeping copious notes. So in this roundtable, speakers stress that digital accessibility is key for the realization of the rights of persons with disabilities and to promote independent living and inclusion, especially as our world is becoming increasingly digital in education, employment, healthcare, transport, financial services, and many other facets of life. However, digital technology is not accessible for many persons with disabilities. We heard that lack of awareness, lack of know-how, and unaffordability of assistive technology for persons with disabilities remain key obstacles. We heard inspiring examples promoting digital accessibility, such as subsidies to assistive technology, video call services with remote sign language interpretation, distribution of free devices to persons with disabilities, establishment of accessibility requirements in public procurement, training of persons with disabilities in digital accessibility, auditing and consultancy services, ensuring that government services are designed with digital accessibility in mind. On the way forward, speakers suggested more investment in education and outreach, particularly in training businesses on digital accessibility, involving key partners and working with organizations of persons with disabilities, adopting accessibility standards and legislation, using human-centered and inclusive approaches in developing digital technologies, developing policies to promote digital accessibility for underrepresented groups such as persons with deafblindness, persons with disabilities in rural areas, and women with girls and disabilities, providing economic assistance to persons with disabilities to support access to digital technologies, and provide assistive technology in schools. As we end this discussion today, let me take a moment to add a thought of my own. All of us in this room are committed to the rights of persons with disabilities, committed to the cause of accessibility. But it is a fact that the world has always been unfair, discriminatory, and unequal to those with disabilities. That is why we needed a CRPD in the first place. It is also a fact that we have always played catch-up and continue to do so. But there are new frontiers that are opening in digital technology, such as artificial intelligence, which has the potential to either be a boon or a bane. It was the Special Rapporteur, Jared Quinn, who warned us yesterday by saying that while we have always played catch-up during the third industrial revolution, the internet, we cannot afford to do so in the fourth industrial revolution. If we do not integrate the accessibility discourse in AI from inception, there may not be a chance to even play catch-up. So perhaps the fight has just begun. Therefore, let us proceed from today's discussion with the intention to reinvigorate ourselves, rejuvenate ourselves, and with dedication, continue in our common endeavor to make the world a better place for those with disabilities. On behalf of my fellow co-chair, Dr. Mohammad Ali Lutfi, I would like to thank all our distinguished panelists, all delegates and participants from the civil society community and the United Nations system for your valuable contributions that enrich the discussion of our roundtable on the important issue of digital accessibility for persons with disabilities. I wish to acknowledge with sincere thanks the capable support and service of the Secretariat, notably UNDESA, and all our interpreters, card service providers, and sign language interpreters, among many others who worked tirelessly behind the scenes and helped to deliver this successful discussion. A special thank you to the translators who agreed to go out of the way and extend their services beyond the allocated time limit. Thank you for all your work. I would also like to remind all speakers to consider sending their statements to e-statements@un.org for posting in the UN Journal no later than 2 hours after delivery, if you may wish to do so. Roundtable 2 is now formally concluded. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thank you.